Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. So our elected officials represent us, and if you don't know who your members of Congress are, here's a great way for you to find who your members of Congress are. But I suspect that all of you know who your members of Congress are because you wouldn't be involved in this otherwise. And we need to let them know that we care about these issues and it's important to us. Our elected officials, we hope, vote their conscience, but we also want them to be influenced by their constituents, and especially if many people contact them about an issue. And people of faith are people that really have a very strong voice. I've heard this repeatedly from many people saying that elected officials look to the people of faith. Many of our Pennsylvania elected officials, both at the national level and the state level, are religious people themselves, and therefore they respect other religious people. And that's why it's important to be speaking from your faith and telling them that. My representative in the state Senate told me that there are many issues that are complex and they're often opposing views, and she decides how she's going to vote based upon how the majority of her constituents have let her know. So there could be an issue that's environmental versus labor, although those issues really are not environmental versus labor. They're just appear to be. She'll vote the way most people have told her what they care about. Anything else you want to add, Seth or Ryan, on why we need to be doing this and it's important for our elected officials to know what we care about?
Yeah, I know for us, due to recess, the past week and a half, like 2 weeks, we try to put pressure on key members in Congress and also the Senate, and just to make sure that one, if they're doing the right thing, that we're thanking them for their work, because there are a lot of organizations, and just in general, politicians catch a lot of flack. So, so we try to take a little bit of a different approach at times, to our work, and that doesn't mean we're not trying to hold people accountable, but we've done that about the past 2 weeks, and we've probably had about close to 200 letters submitted into the office of Senator Casey, Representative Wild, and also Representative Boyle's office too. So it's been pretty good for us. And I think it's something easy, like what Phyllis was talking about, that, we can get our volunteers involved and they can do it anytime. You can do it literally, at your house, while you're outside, and just submit a letter. So, it's just like one of the, tools that we use to, get people involved, and also, just show some, support for our politicians. And then at times, when they're not doing the right thing, we definitely don't hesitate to tell them that they're not doing the right thing. But I mean, Seth, you have anything else you want to add to that, just as far as like, why we do our letters?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been doing letters for quite a while. I've been with climate action programs for like 3 years now. And we often hear from the offices, from elected officials, from our congressional delegates, how much they track data of how many letters they're getting. And they really want to know from their constituents what matters to them and what top priority issues they're going to focus on. For example, we just had a meeting yesterday, and we talked about how our letters to many elected officials helped push those 9 Democrats to vote for the budget resolution in the House that were on the fence, the more moderate Democrats who were saying it's too much money, it's too much spending. But through a lot of our initiatives and our programs, we've really helped to push people over the fence when they're on the edge. We often say that, Congress doesn't start the parade, but they jump in front and act like it was their idea. The more they hear from their constituents about what matters to you and your story, the more they're going to talk about it and the more they're going to act like it was their idea. So it's often super important that we're writing them, and we often have to unify around a message. And the more volume they get, as well as personalization in letters, I think the more impact it has and the more likely they can be swayed one way or the other.
So what we're going to be talking about now is legislation that is not yet written. So it doesn't have the details yet written. And it's so important for us to push the details that we want. So it's a package that's going to go through both the House and the Congress and the Senate rather, and we need to demand what we want, and we really want it to be strong on environmental issues, climate change solutions, and not to water it down, because watering it down will not bring us the end results that we know we need to have. So I started to say a little bit about people of faith and why we really have a very, very strong voice. I have heard from senators, particularly in Congress, that people of faith, particularly who are not in favor of climate change, who feel it's God's will or believe that it's even climate deniers, and speak from their faith a lot. And if they don't hear from those of us who care, and those of us who believe that we need to be promoting climate solutions, they tend to generalize to say, well, people of faith really don't care about this issue. People of faith care about other issues. And that's why we really need to talk to them, because they hear from people, the climate deniers or the people who say it's God in God's will so much more. We need to talk to them. We can talk to them about our morals, our values. We can quote scriptures. We can quote holy texts as a way of really making our arguments so much stronger. And we know that in Pennsylvania that matters. So what we want to be doing is bringing the issues to the officials' attention, and you can do this in many ways. We do not have to be geeks or wonks on policy and statistics and that sort of stuff. They get briefed by lots of people. But we may be telling them something that they don't know necessarily. We want to be talking about a local issue, how climate is affecting you, your lives, your environment around you, and talk about what's important to you and to your constituents, and how you can advocate for environmental justice. And I think that's an issue that within faith groups, we have a really strong position for talking about it. Also caring for the earth. It's in Genesis, and for many people, that's a very fundamental thing. You can call their offices, you can email them directly if you're writing about any issue. Anything else you want to elaborate on this? The most effective communication is meeting with them, meeting with their legislative aides, but that only comes about when we have some power together and we work on issues where they start to see that there's enough people who want to talk about that. So the goal of writing really is to establish a relationship with the representative or their aide. Any Seth or Ryan?
Yeah, I think that's all fantastic. I agree with all of that. And I would add that, you sometimes you got to meet people where they are on their letter writing, so there's many ways to get a letter through, right? It can be through, digital signups or sign-on letters in person, doing those in-person drops, writing one by hand, by mail you can do, right? Sending one to Phyllis, there's many ways to get it through, and, whatever works best for you, you can go that route, but it is really important that they're hearing from people on a multitude of mediums.
So some guidelines for communicating: be polite and respectful. When we get emails that are ugly and that are demanding and disrespectful, nobody wants to read them, and I think they don't get as much attention. We want to urge for support, but we don't want to demand support, and that's a slight difference. I urge you to support as opposed to I demand that you do such and such. Be as specific as possible in your request, and at this point, we're not that specific because the words are not there yet, but we're talking about the budget reconciliation bill, having as much climate solutions as possible. And we're talking about the specifics within the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The most important thing is to keep it personal and to put it in your own words. So although we're going to be giving you a template letter to write it on, make it your own, make it your own words. And you don't have to be an English major or somebody who writes wonderful novels to write a letter. It's really important to speak it in your own words. Keep it to about 1 page if you're typing it or writing it, and make sure you include your full name and your contact information, your address, and because they only really look at whether or not you're a constituent. So if you're a Pennsylvania resident, then it's important that that you're writing to our Pennsylvania representatives and senators. So there's a general template for the letter that we've been following for a while, and I suspect that lots of organizations recommend this. Start the letter with thanking the official for what they've done. And you can find what they have done on their website. So if they have voted for something in the past, and it doesn't have to be environmental, but something that you have liked, thank them for it. And if you're writing to a Democrat, you can obviously write to thank them for the most recent votes that they had on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. You can thank them for the vote for the reconciliation broad outlines. If you're writing to a Republican or somebody who hasn't voted in the way you want to do it, try to find something on their website that makes that you can relate to and thank them for. If worse comes to worse, you can thank them for their service to the country, for representing you, for always being truthful to you, or whatever. And then tell your story. Why does it matter to you? This is really the heart of the letter, and we'll spend some time on that later on so that you'll feel very empowered to talk about your story. Your story does not have to be a tearjerker. It can just be why it's important to you and in your own words, and then talk about as much specifics as you possibly can. As I said, right now, we don't have specifics, but you can include some things. Include some facts as it relates to your story, but the facts are not nearly as important as your personal story, and then conclude it with your name, address, email address. So questions on the basic format or template? Just hop in because I can't see people.
I have a
Please.
question.
Mm-hmm.
This is Joyce. I'm just wondering, we get so many electronic letters to pass on to our senators and representatives. Is it better to do a handwritten letter that you put in the mail? Is that more effective than something that you pass on to them through the computer? Because that's what they receive all the time from people.
I'm going to let the pros answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, Seth can speak on this just as much as me. Like, I've just been here a little bit longer, but I know for us, like, one good example of like the difference between the two, right now because of COVID, it's just easier for us to do everything electronic, naturally because of the situation. But during the last election cycle in 2020, we did have a concentrated effort to write letters across all of our states, and even here in Pennsylvania. And for us, they all were handwritten letters. And I know, like, here in Pennsylvania, it went really well for us. Like, I forget how many we actually wrote, but I know we have one volunteer, and I mean, he couldn't get outside and knock doors or go to a visibility event, but he told one of my organizers, he's like, look, I'll commit to writing 500 letters for you all and finding, friends to, complete these 500 letters. And he literally made it happen, him, a couple of his friends, and just, his network. So, I think the handwritten letter, to be honest with you, is, more effective. Like Phyllis said, it's real personal because it's like you were saying, Joyce. I mean, they see it all the time, especially now because of COVID. They're probably seeing like a huge uptick in electronic communication. Like, I'm not too sure what that's looking like as far as the numbers, but I'm just assuming that. But the handwritten letter, it's just a personal thing. It's like if you get a handwritten letter from somebody, I know my age group, like I'm kind of like stuck in between. Like, Seth is younger than me. But, I know for me, like, I kind of remember like the switch, from like, cell phones, from like, the home phones and all that stuff. So even for me, if I get like a handwritten letter, like, it really means a lot, even if it's just a little bit. So I'm pretty sure it has the same effect, with politicians. And, Seth, you can add anything else you'd like to.
So you could write the same thing to the 3 different politicians.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point I
They're not
forgot
going
to
to
make.
share what they receive from you.
Right. Once you write to one person, it's very easy to modify it for the other 2. The only thing that you have to change is what you're thanking them for. And if you're writing to 2 Democrats, you really don't have to you don't have to change it very much.
And yeah, just one more thing that I was gonna add to it, like I was telling you all, like we've been doing a lot of letters the past 2 weeks because of recess. So it's been pretty easy for us to put those together, and a lot like what Phyllis was talking about. And if you don't mind, I'll share my screen. So I'm just gonna show you a quick example of one of the letters that we're targeting for Senator Casey right now. Just so you can see it. Oh, well, I can't share my screen because I'm a participant.
We can
But
make you a host.
okay. Yeah, I think it'll be like an easy way, just to show you kind of like one quick example of what we're doing. And, it wasn't necessarily like something that we were told to do, but me and Seth had to kind of like think about like a way that we can engage, a key member, here in Pennsylvania. So Senator Casey, like he introduced a bill probably about this time last month to essentially renew funding for the Civilian Conservation Corps. So basically what that is, if you're familiar with like AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, all that, I did AmeriCorps for a year, and the funding for those programs, basically a stipend that goes to those volunteers and they do it for a year. They even have like summer programs now, like they tweaked it around a little bit. But the Civilian Conservation Corps ties into that. So we kind of noticed that as far as Senator Casey, taking the lead on that, and it was, here in Pennsylvania, and we just decided to post on our social media page. It's called Mobilize, so it's a good way for us to engage people. And we just created kind of like a letter template, like Phyllis is talking about, but we also put in there that you can use this template and submit it to Senator Casey. Or you can just tweak this around and make it a little bit more personal and send it into his office.
So suppose some of us, like myself, have horrible handwriting. Can we type it?
Sure. Yeah, you can definitely type it. Yeah, type it, print it out, put it in the envelope, send it through the mail. You probably don't get a lot of mail either. Now we're talking about the whole digital aspect of things. So that would be just as unique of a touch. And, even the stamps, stamps are unique too. So, whatever way you can make it unique and personal, for the politician, the better.
I've heard that writing a letter to the senators or to anybody in Washington by US mail is not a good idea anymore because it gets slowed down. It has to get opened. So it might get there a month later.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah, I didn't really think about that, but yeah, that's a pretty good point. Seth, do you have anything else to add into it? See, you came off of mute.
Yeah, I mean, if there's ever a sense of urgency, like a vote on a bill, I would refrain from doing the, send a letter 5 days before thinking they'll read it and be able to track that data. Digital ones, I think, will come through a bit faster. And I think it really also depends on the elected official. I've heard of some making big boards in their office with all these postcards of people they've heard from, and they really appreciate the personal letters, and some are more digital oriented and want to just track the data and have their staffers put them in categories, and then they can see what people have been writing about. So I think it's good to kind of also pay attention to who you're writing and maybe have some background on what they prefer. But I think both are incredibly important. And if you're open to doing both, I would recommend doing both. Send them an email and a handwritten.
And postcards get there quicker. So postcards are another venue. So what I'm going to talk about is an advocacy solution that we've been using through Jewish Earth Alliance. I know that the Unitarians also use this, and I believe the Quakers do this. We provide a fact sheet every single month about one issue. This month, the issue we're talking about is renewable energy. And then we provide a sample letter for you to put it into your own words. And all you really have to do is customize the letter by putting in the person's name, what you want to thank them for, your story, and then why, as a person of faith, this matters to you. And then if you're writing about renewable energy, the Jewish Earth Alliance puts all the letters from Pennsylvania together, and that gives us power. So if we have, I'm striving for 25 letters to Casey every month and 25 letters to me every month. We're nowhere near there, but that's my big goal. send them to me at my email address, which is phyllis2723@gmail.com, or you can send them to letters@jewishearthalliance.org. And we collate all the letters together. We put a cover letter on it saying, here are X number of letters from your constituents across the state who are supporting renewable energy. So I would like to show you those that right now, if I can do that. So here's the background information that's provided on renewable energy for this month. There's a little background. There's always why it's so important to be doing this. Although they talk about a Jewish perspective, you can easily make it a Christian perspective. You can make it all kinds of other things. Or you can just talk about morals and the right thing to be doing. And then they summarize it again for you with the background information, and they always give you several talking points, a key message. Here's the 4 or 5 talking points, where you can learn more to read more. And then here's your sample letter. And as we get past this slides, I want to really talk about how we can write a letter together. Each of us can start on the letter. So that's what I would really like to do in terms of that. Questions about the template and how it works?
Phyllis, can we get on your list, the list that receives this every month?
Of course, if I have your email, you will get this from me constantly.
Good, thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
really helpful.
Does that include new people?
Yep. If you're on the IPL list, you should have gotten this in advance. If you didn't,
Right. Yeah.
we would be really happy to send it to you. I think that the more letters we get from the varying faith groups, the better our letters will be.
Right.
Right. This is what we need with the UCC church.
I
Right.
think so many times when you're just a single person writing a letter, you feel like, what does it matter? But when you put them together, it just seems to have more impact.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that's how the format goes. And I'm going to share my screen again. And I will be very happy to send that. Is it in the chat where these sample letters are? Because I can't see the chat right now.
Your email is in the chat.
Okay.
Yes, I believe I put everything that was that you asked.
And if you have children, grandchildren, if you teach Sunday school, ask them to participate. As people were saying, you know, a handwritten letter is great, but a handwritten something from a child with a picture on it is even more important. And those are often what gets published in their newsletter, or they get put up on their bulletin boards or whatever. So children can be very compelling. It can be a little poem, a little story, a picture. It can, but it, you know, if they write, I am 10 years old, or I'm 8 years old, and I really care about the environment, that matters. So that would be just something to keep in mind. If you can include children's pictures and words. So why now? I think all of you who are on this call know why now. If we don't act on big climate solutions, there is no time to lose. I mean, we have gotten so many horrible reports. We're in code red, etc. And we need to be really focusing on clean energy and getting away from fossil fuels to renewable energy for transportation and power. And the pandemic has made it so obvious that there are so many disparities and inequities that we really need to be focusing both on clean energy, clean power, and also focusing on frontline communities. So as I said earlier, we do not yet have the details, but we need to push Congress on what the details will be and what we want them to have in this bill. So what is your story? So let's take a minute or two and talk about what is your story? Why do you care about this? Manny, I'm gonna call on you. You and I met last month and we talked about what is your story? You want to offer your story about your experience with Superstorm Sandy? I should have told you in advance I was going to call on you. I'm sorry.
No worries. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Because I was having some technical issues. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you said, we met last month. I just started writing my first few letters, and I was able to have them be submitted with the Jewish Earth Alliance. But specifically, I wanted to, incorporate my story into the letter, and I am originally from New Jersey, and I was living at home with my parents during Superstorm Sandy a few years back. And I know a lot of families affected, and even, my home was affected. So that is something I didn't even really consider writing about until speaking with Phyllis. Just those small connections can go a long way as far as like connecting and reaching with our local politicians. Along with, I'm a young person doing this work, so that's something I always like to mention. But just being that I actually had actually experienced, something as significant as Sandy, it was something I wanted to speak about, and I want to continue to speak about in my writing.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have experience with renewable energy in terms of what they've done in their own lives that they could share, or what they plan to do?
I mean, I have shared statewide the difference, having lived in Vermont, where we were part of Reggie long time before Pennsylvania, how devastating it was to me, having been born in Pennsylvania in this beautiful land of William Penn's forests, and returning and finding, I can't even open my windows in the summertime because of the pollution level,
Right.
the orange alerts.
That's a great personal story, especially talking about your own personal health effects. And it all has to do with the fact that we're burning fossil fuels. And if we weren't burning fossil fuels at such a rate, we would have less air quality days. So that's a wonderful story to talk about in terms of, I can't even open my window because we've had so many days in which we have bad air quality. That's a perfect example of a great story. And I think just talking about the fact that we are in this letter, we want to be talking about clean energy standards. If we had a national clean energy standard, we wouldn't have to worry about states like Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio, which are reticent to join RGGI. It would be a national energy standard. And we'll be talking about
I've got a story.
Okay.
So, when I was in college, I worked on hedge fund disclosure activism around fossil fuel investment at my university. And so I know that in Pennsylvania, UPenn has been working on divesting from fossil fuels. And I'm not sure how far that movement has gone. But I know that also, besides writing to legislators, there are, banks or credit unions that you can choose that don't invest money in, I heard BlackRock was a bad, I don't know all the details of like certain banks are more invested in not caring about renewable energy. And then there are certain banks that are, notorious for not caring about renewable energy. So I feel like, I've been involved with environmental activism for quite a long time. It can be a dangerous profession. So I think, I was also like, I remember Sandy, like when I was living in Philly, and my apartment got hit by lightning that day. So like the fire alarm went off and we had to evacuate, but we were all safe. God was very protective, and like all the trees in West Philly, all of them, all the sycamore trees fell down. So like, yeah, I feel like it's very important to, you know, do whatever you can to try to move towards clean energy. So yeah, I feel, you know, with writing senators and stuff, I have not um, done as much in terms of letter writing to our public officials, but I've seen some really positive things coming out of public officials lately around climate change and renewable energy. So I'm really feeling more hopeful around change around these kinds of things and not needing to use really strong armed activism all the time around these kinds of issues. So yeah, I'm excited to thank you for inviting me to this call, and I'm gonna try to write a letter sharing a little bit of my personal story around how this affects, you know, me. And I have family in Bangladesh, which is constantly impacted by flooding. That's just their way of life. But luckily, my family is in a drier location. But there, I have family friends whose family are in places that are disappearing because of flooding. So yeah, it's important.
You have a super compelling story to talk about family who are losing their land and who are no longer going to be able to either farm or be able to live where they're living. That's so compelling. And we all have to realize that we may be living in a part of the United States that's not flooding, but the world is flooding. So that's a fabulous story.
Okay, I'll try that.
And we're all interconnected.
And we're all interconnected. That's correct.
Right.
And we all have to vote like we're interconnected. All these are wonderful points. I'm going to move on. I hope you got some ideas to talk about, and we'll come back to it. So we want to make this happen. And so I just want to start us off by let's doing a collective letter together. If you have a paper and pencil, or you want to take some notes on your phone or your computer, let's start writing this letter. We're going to write to Senator Casey first. What should we thank Casey for?
Brian, we recently collected some letters on writing Senator Casey around the Civilian Climate Corps. I don't know if you have some more details on that for us.
Yeah, we actually do. I think I can share my screen now, so I'm gonna try to do that just to
All right,
show what we've been doing.
I'll stop sharing so
Okay.
you can share.
Yes,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry about that. You should be
That's all
able to
right.
share now.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I got it right here. So let me know if you all can see that. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Good. Okay, so basically, we've had about 208 signups on our mobilized page. It's basically like a way for us to engage new volunteers. So about at this point, we started shifting over to thanking Senator Casey, Rep Wild, and Rep Boyle, just for different points of, pieces of legislation. So as you can see, it was a big uptick in activism once we shifted over the letters. And, as far as Senator Casey in the Civilian Conservation Corps, I'm going to show you all what Seth was talking about, just so you can see a sample of how we're targeting him. So find it right quick. Oh, so it just in it. Okay, so here you go. So this is the letter. So this is basically the draft that we had. Anybody that does a letter, they can basically tweak it around. So this is essentially what we came up with. And, like I was talking about, the Conservation Corps, it's pretty important, just as far as a piece of federal legislation. And you can see it's pretty simple. I mean, it's a lot of what, Phyllis was talking about. We're just acknowledging a piece of legislation that he's introduced prior to recess and just thanking him for the great work.
So then you want to pick a fact, a talking point that you like. And let me see if I can get the talking points on the screen. I have to share screen now. Okay, so the talking points are electric production is responsible for 25% of the US greenhouse gas emission, and approximately 62% of our electricity comes from burning fossil fuels. That's one point. CES, that's the clean energy standards, are a proven policy we can build on for successes in states that have already implemented CES. A third point is the federal CES should not allow false solutions such as biogas, carbon capture that prop up the fossil fuel industry. CES are an important tool to stave off the 1.5-degree increase in our global warming. And then we want to design just federal CES standards by requiring steps such as investments in environmental justice communities, reductions in local air pollution, high labor standards, and distributed energy for low wealth communities. So any of those that you resonate with?
Does CES stand for Clean Energy Standards?
Yes, it does.
That's what, okay.
It's basically an idea like a Reggie type of thing in which we're going to be increasing, like if you figure over the years, we've been requiring cars to have more and more
Emissions test.
exactly, and be higher in terms of gas mileage per gallon and that type of stuff. It's kind of like a Reggie in terms of power and electricity, and it says, you know, these are standards that you have to reach. So actually, we're going to be talking about that next Wednesday at this time. We have a speaker going to be talking to us about clean energy standards, so we can learn all about clean energy standards next week. And that'll be at 7 o'clock next Wednesday.
I have a comment. I have a friend who drives. This is kind of crazy. I have a friend who drives a hybrid, and someone was trying to steal his catalytic converter. Is that a thing in cars? So because I guess they're quite expensive or something. So I am all for clean energy standards on cars, but I like, this is something I know that stuff gets stolen off of cars, but I didn't know there was like a higher risk with hybrid cars. Is that true? Or it's just
I can actually talk a little bit about that. I actually saw an article, I think it was like in the Washington Post, and that is a thing with catalytic converters, and it kind of like extends like beyond just like hybrid vehicles. It's basically like any part in a vehicle that's deemed as valuable. So aside from that, you know, just with the hybrid vehicles, even the bigger ones like the Dodge Chargers and the Challengers, people actually have had a lot of instances where these took out their whole entire engine. And that's like a V8. It's like a big thing, you know, but usually like these, like they'll target those vehicles because they know they can sell the engine for about, you know, anywhere in between maybe $15,000, you know, $20,000, you know, just with the engine. So, you know, it's definitely a thing, you know, it's definitely a thing, and kind of extends beyond everything. But I think also just like the clean energy standards, it's like, you know, it's a good thing across the board, because right now, you know, hybrid vehicles and straight electric vehicles, as far as the price point, you know, it's really out of reach of like what Phyllis was just talking about in lower income communities. So it becomes a social justice issue because of that, you know, economically. So the more that the federal government and then also state governments can, you know, enact these requirements, you know, the better for the future, because manufacturers will start producing more electric vehicles, and they'll start, you know, basically ramping down your more traditional vehicles like the V8s and all that stuff. And, you know, it'll make it more affordable for everybody over time to get an EV if they want to. But right now, it's just it costs so much money, you know, because the manufacturers, like, they just see it as a way of like, okay, if we, you know, switch our whole fleet to EVs, we're going to lose a whole lot of money. And that's basically the way they look at it. So a lot of times it does take like the federal government and state governments to put pressure on them, and then things can get better. But it definitely turns into a social justice issue. And the catalytic converter thing, it was the Prius. It was the Prius, and I think it was the article I was reading about, like cops were trying to figure out like why are Priuses becoming victims of thieves. And that's exactly what it was. It was a catalytic converter because, right now it's a real valuable thing, just as far as hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles.
So if you could
That was-
possibly put that into your letter about, protecting people about that, but certainly the idea of incentives. I actually bought an electric vehicle. I love it. But I bought it knowing that I was going to get a tax credit, but poor people don't earn enough money to get a tax credit. So an alternative would be to give them cash immediately as opposed to a credit. So there are ways. I mean, when I bought my,
Phyllis,
yeah,
I'd like to make a comment. If you could scroll back to where the talking points are.
sure.
Okay, here's my comment. I just read through all of these several times. And my feeling would be, I don't know enough about some of these statements that are here to make a statement to a representative or a senator that sounds like I know what I'm talking about. And like, for example, CES, our proven policy, we can build on the successes of states that have already implemented these. Well, I am going to take it that there is proof. There are states that we know, but I don't know enough about this to feel comfortable putting these ideas down without understanding what it is that I'm actually promoting. Do you know what I'm saying?
I sure do, and that's an excellent point. That's why there's the next section of the letter that says learn more,
Right,
and you can click any of those.
right.
I would think that the very first top point, though, you do know enough that electricity production is responsible for an awful lot of greenhouse gases. And if we reduced our electricity consumption with fossil fuels and use greenhouse gases, we would be healthier. We would have less pollution. I'm sure you know enough about that.
So you don't need to
Pick
put a
one
lot
point.
of talking points. You could just
No, pick one point, the one that you identify with.
Okay.
So you don't have to become a wonk about clean energy standards. But I think everybody would agree that we don't want the temperatures to rise more, and we're seeing that more and more this summer. And we could talk about that in terms of the last point, or the pollution levels, or something of this nature. So you don't have to pick all the points, pick the one. I mean, this is, you figure that there are engineers writing about this, and there were housewives writing about this. So
I've been reading a lot about carbon capture, and I'm just surprised that it's a false solution.
very
Because
much so.
there are climate groups that are talking about it.
It's a false solution because the fossil fuel industry wants it. And
Yes.
it's in the current infrastructure package, and I think that's probably the only way we got it to pass.
Oh,
But I don't really want to get off on
okay,
one of my tangents.
okay.
So thank you so much for this meeting. I have to leave, but I took notes, and then I have to send the letter to you by September 9th.
Right.
Okay.
That would
All
be
right, thank
great.
you so much for the information.
Thank you for coming. So I just want to make sure we get through more points of the letter. We talked about our own personal points of view. Would somebody like to mention why, as a person of faith, this matters to them? Why this is important that we avert climate change?
Because as a person of faith, we consider everyone as brothers and sisters to us, and we have a responsibility to those that are most vulnerable because of the changes in our climate.
I hope you wrote that down because that was perfect.
Well, I didn't write it down, but it's in my head.
Okay. So, I mean, that's exactly the type of thing you want to say. You can put in your own specific religion if you want to, but that's exactly it. We feel responsible for all other people. And that's basically the writing.
As well as all of creation, the birds and the bees and the trees.
That's right.
And that provide us oxygen. Yeah.
That's right. So that's basically the letter. We talked about how we can thank Casey. We talked about picking one point that matters, your own personal story, and then as a person of faith. So
Okay.
one more thing I just want to say, how could we thank Senator Toomey? What can we say about that? And I might call on Ryan and Seth to help us out with that one.
Right. He's voted against everything.
Yeah, not much comes to mind there, right?
Right, he's voted against everything I voted for.
I think what Phyllis said earlier really rings true. Is you can find something to thank even someone like.
Thank you for not running again.
You can start with that, yeah. You can thank him for his service, right?
Right.
There's ways to go about it. Maybe looking at his history of votes and find something at some point that you could thank him for. I'm sure, I believe he came around on one thing, was it last year? I forget exactly what it was.
He came around, he voted to impeach the President Trump.
Right.
After,
Yes, he did.
Because he was stepping down.
Yeah.
That was what I was thinking of. Thank you. I don't
So
know if you
that-
want to mix that in. It's kind of,
No, I don't think so.
but yeah, there's always something that you can think about, and it can be short. You don't have to go into a profuse thank you for Toomey, right? You can say a quick little thank you and then really jump into the spanking rather than the thanking, we call it. So to really hit it home.
if you've ever signed a petition to Toomey and your name and email address are there, you're going to get a 2 or 3 page letter back from him. So if worst comes to worst, you can always thank him for the fact that he takes, or he or an aide take the time to really explain their positions to you. I mean, he and I are not on the same planet when we're talking about positions, but at least he's very conscientious and writes a very long letter. So I want to make sure everybody knows the process. You have the materials to write a letter. We're writing about renewable energy and why it's important to you and to the planet. Write the letters either handwritten or type them. I type personally because it's just much easier to do 3 letters and much quicker for me. Email them to me, and then I will submit all the letters that we get across the state with a cover letter, and it says these are people of faith, these are 25 constituents, these are all Pennsylvanians who care, and that gives it a little bit more impact. Questions?
So then next week, you're going to have a continuation of this?
We're going to be talking about clean energy standards next week. Yep. Because I know that's an issue that a lot of people don't know about. So I'm having somebody from Vote Solar, which is an organization that's trying to get clean energy standards, coming and talking about that. I plan to run these meetings at least once a month, but maybe twice a month. We could be doing a how to write letters and get your letters started, and then an informational session. So if there's topics that you want to learn about, please let me know. I'm thinking that a fall topic might be the infrastructure bank, because I think that's something that people know about. But if there's issues that you want to hear about, I would be real happy to find a speaker for you. Other questions or comments? It is not so hard to write a letter. It really is much easier, especially after you write the first letter. I want to thank Seth and Ryan for adding their expertise, and all of you for your participating and for your questions. And have a good evening, and I hope to see you again in the future. And mostly I hope to get a letter from you soon.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Thanks. Thank you.
very
Have a
much.
great
All of you as
evening.
Thank you,
well.
Phyllis.
Thank you.
See you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Have a great night.